Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the flickering candlelight of ancient Rome, a world where even closing your eyes was an act of bravery. You probably won't survive this, not because of gladiators or emperors, but because of the hard, uneven floors and the total absence of anything resembling a pillow. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and while you're at it, comment your location and your local time down below. Let's see who else is awake with you across the centuries. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander down a narrow stone path that smells faintly of olive oil and damp dust. The air feels heavy, not quite cold, not quite warm. Just that dense Mediterranean night that wraps around your skin like old linen. Rome is quieter than usual tonight. The chatter of the marketplace has faded, the fires in the forges have died down, and somewhere in the distance, you hear a mule snort and stamp its hooves. You keep walking, guided by the weak glow of a small oil lamp swinging gently from a wall. The light flickers over weathered faces carved in marble, forgotten gods, missing noses, empty eyes. You imagine them watching you, judging you for needing a soft bed to fall asleep. Romans didn't. At least not most of them. The idea of a bedroom like yours, soft sheets, plump pillows, maybe even a scented candle, would sound absurd to the average Roman. You might say, but surely the rich had comfort. Sure, a few did. But for most of Rome's million residents, sleep was just a pause between exhaustion and another day of survival. You step past a tavern. Through the cracked wooden door, laughter spills out rough and tired. The smell of wine, sour and strong, mixes with sweat. Men in tunics slump on benches made of old crates. They'll fall asleep right there, heads on tables sticky with spilled drink, their dreams soaked in the same fumes that carried them to oblivion. Scholars still argue whether the ancient Romans truly valued sleep or simply tolerated it as a biological inconvenience. There are records of people boasting about sleeping little, a strange badge of discipline even then. Maybe not much has changed. You turn another corner and almost trip over a sleeping dog. Or at least you think it's sleeping. It opens one lazy eye, looks at you like you've interrupted something divine, then huffs and goes back to dreaming about whatever ancient dogs dreamed about. Above, a faint drizzle starts, not enough to wet your clothes, but enough to make the cobblestones glisten. Somewhere in that shimmering reflection, you catch a glimpse of another world, the same stars you know, but older, purer, unpolluted. You wonder what it must have felt like to sleep under those stars, with nothing beneath you but straw or sand. No blanket, no pillow, just your tunic rolled under your head and maybe a companion's arm for warmth. And yet, somehow, they did it. Every night. A faint voice calls out, the night watchman making his round. He carries a torch that sputters with resin smoke. You flatten yourself against a wall, blending into the dark, watching him shuffle by in sandals that slap the ground rhythmically. For him, the night is work, not rest. Rome never truly sleeps. The baker is already kneading dough in the next street. The temple guard is muttering his prayers to Mars, and the river Tiber murmurs in the background like a restless god. Your lamp flickers low, the oil almost spent. You pause before a doorway, an insula, a multi-story Roman apartment building. The plaster is cracked, the wooden beams lean dangerously. You hear snores from inside, muffled whispers, a baby's soft cry. It's strange. The sound of people sleeping has always been oddly comforting, hasn't it? Even 2,000 years ago, the world was full of these tiny human noises, the rhythm of breathing and dreaming. You move closer, peeking through the open doorway. Inside, a man curls up on a mat stuffed with straw. His wife lies beside him, using her folded cloak as a blanket. In the corner, a small clay pot glows with the dying embers of a charcoal fire. Its warmth doesn't reach the edges of the room, and their breath fogs in the cold air. You notice how they tuck their feet close, conserving every ounce of body heat. The odd detail, they sleep wearing their day tunics, because undressing fully was considered improper, even unsafe. Fire, rats, or thieves could appear at any time. You shift your weight, and the floor creaks. The man stirs. You freeze, heart racing as he mumbles something and rolls over. You think about how fragile sleep is, then and now. Maybe that's why ancient Romans didn't chase comfort. They accepted that rest came when it wanted, not when invited. A mosquito buzzes by your ear. You slap the air lazily and chuckle under your breath. Some things really never change. You picture the mosquito's ancestors, ancient little vampires that feasted on Julius Caesar himself. Maybe not, but the thought makes you grin. The drizzle grows heavier. You pull your cloak tighter, if only in imagination, and start walking again. The stone street leads uphill now, toward the heart of the city. The Forum, sleeping under the moon. Columns rise like silent sentinels, and for a brief moment, the whole world seems paused. You could almost fall asleep standing here, lulled by the whisper of wind through marble ruins. Your eyelids droop. The hum of ancient life settles around you. Distant carts rolling, a baby crying again, the deep sigh of the city breathing in its sleep. You realize that Rome, for all its grandeur, was still just a collection of tired people trying to rest. And maybe that's the softest truth of all. Somewhere, a rooster crows too early. You smirk. Even in the wrong century, mornings never wait for you to be ready. You walk a few more steps before the lamp dies completely. Darkness folds over you, thick but calm. The kind of darkness that doesn't frighten. It just reminds you that even empires had bedtime. You lean against the wall, close your eyes, and let the echoes of the city cradle you. Word count 197. Awaiting, continue. You wake, or maybe you never really slept, to the soft rustle of night still breathing through Rome. The drizzle has stopped, leaving behind that clean, earthy scent that clings to ancient stone. You move through it quietly, your sandals scraping against the cobblestones, each step echoing like a whisper from another lifetime. You're not just walking through a city. You're walking through a memory carved in marble and smoke. The streets stretch ahead, uneven and damp, shining faintly under the glow of oil lamps hung outside taverns and doorways. Rome after dark is strange. Not dead, not alive, just suspended. You pass a cart abandoned against a wall, its wooden wheel cracked. A stray cat slips out from beneath it, eyes glowing, tail brushing your ankle like a tiny ghost. You flinch slightly, then laugh at yourself. Sleep deprivation and imagination have always been old friends. To your left, the alley narrows, an ancient artery of the city's heart. You follow it. The walls rise close enough to touch both sides with your fingertips. The smell here changes, less of bread and olive oil, more of old fabric, mold, and humanity. Above, laundry hangs limp from rope lines, tunics, bed sheets, a child's wool cloak fluttering faintly in the damp breeze. You imagine the family inside, already asleep, their lives stacked one atop another in this insula, a multi-floor apartment where ceilings drip and floors creak like nervous teeth. You pause outside a door, with a faint crack of light beneath it. From inside, you hear the sound of someone coughing, harsh, dry, persistent. Life here is thin, you realize. Thin walls, thin blankets, thin chances. Yet still, they sleep. Or at least they try to. You lean closer, peering through a small window. A woman sits by a clay lamp, mending a torn tunic. Her son lies on the floor nearby, curled like a cat, wrapped in what looks like a tattered wool sheet. His chest rises and falls. That rhythmic motion, soft and steady, somehow cuts through centuries. It's a reminder that people, no matter the age, always needed this fragile piece called sleep. Scholars still argue whether ancient Romans considered sleep a luxury or a moral weakness. Stoic philosophers often called it a temporary surrender to laziness. Yet here, in this dim room, it feels like something sacred. You move on, stepping carefully over puddles. The cobblestones glisten like polished bone. In the distance, a group of young men stumble out of a tavern, singing something that probably started as a song and devolved into noise. One of them throws an amphora against the wall. It shatters, scattering the scent of stale wine into the air. A window above slams shut. A voice curses, then silence again. The night folds back in on itself, as if nothing happened. You glance up at the rooftops. Some are flat, some slanted, some patched with thatch and tiles stolen from better houses. You spot movement, a figure spreading out straw under the stars. Another sleeper, maybe a servant or traveler too poor to rent a bed. You can almost feel the straw pricking his skin through the thin tunic. No blanket, no pillow. Just a few layers between flesh and sky. You shiver, not from the cold, but from the thought of enduring that stillness, the way silence can turn loud when you're trying to drift off. A donkey brays nearby, breaking the quiet. You follow the sound toward a stable, pushing open the half-rotted door. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of hay, dung, and warm animal breath. The stable boy sleeps propped against a post, arms crossed, head tilted at an impossible angle. The donkey beside him shifts and sighs. You realize this is comfort, Roman style. The body heat of a living creature, the faint rhythm of its breathing, the steady heartbeat that hums through the dark. There's something oddly comforting about it. Primitive, yes, but honest. You watch them for a moment, the boy and the animal, sharing warmth without even knowing it. You think about how modern comfort is built on the illusion of control. Thermostats, blankets, memory foam, while theirs came from surrendering to whatever the night offered. You step back outside. The air bites sharper now. A gust of wind whistles through the alley and snuffs out one of the hanging lamps. The city darkens, one small patch at a time. But Rome never becomes fully black. There's always some glow, from torches at the Forum, or the reflection of moonlight on marble columns. You walk toward that faint light. The path widens as the buildings recede. Ahead, the Forum Romanum stretches open like a sleeping giant. You can almost hear its ancient heartbeat, a quiet thrum of stone and shadow. Statues of emperors and gods loom silently, their faces silvered by moonlight. They've seen countless nights like this. Maybe they even envy mortals for their brief, forgetful rest. You wander past the Temple of Saturn, its columns towering like cold sentinels. The marble steps gleam wet under your feet. You sit down, wrapping your arms around your knees, and exhale slowly. The city hums softly. A rat scurries across the lower step, pauses to sniff your sandal, then disappears. You smile faintly. Some things never evolve, not even pests. The chill creeps into your bones. You lie back against the stone, eyes on the stars. Rome's sky is surprisingly clear tonight, a rare gift. You trace the constellations you know: Orion, Ursa Major, and the faint shimmer of what Romans once called Via Lactea, the Milky Road. You wonder if some sleepless legionnaire once did the same, centuries ago, counting stars instead of sheep. An odd detail you remember: Roman soldiers were often trained to sleep sitting up during campaigns, armor on, sword by their side. It was less about comfort, more about readiness. Sleep, to them, was never pure rest. It was a pause between commands. You think about that as your own back aches against the marble. Maybe humanity's been half awake ever since. The night air thickens again. Somewhere, a fountain gurgles faintly, one of the many scattered across the city. You listen to its rhythm, steady and slow, like the world's own heartbeat. For a moment, you let yourself drift, and then, a faint shuffle behind you. You glance over your shoulder, heart skipping. Just a man, draped in a cloak, walking his route. Maybe a philosopher too deep in thought, or a thief who's lost interest. You exhale, half laughing at your own paranoia. The city can feel haunted sometimes, even when it's only filled with the living. You close your eyes again. The stone beneath you is hard, the air cool, the silence fragile. But you let it hold you anyway. Because in ancient Rome, that was all anyone could do. surrender to sleep when it finally found them. You stir again as the faint scent of smoke drifts through the damp Roman air. It's still night, but the world feels denser, heavier. You rise and find yourself in the maze of the Subura district, Rome's working-class heart, where the walls sweat grime and gossip. This is where most Romans actually lived and slept, not in marble villas, but in creaking tenements stacked like tired lungs. You walk slowly, tracing the sound of breathing and murmurs that slip through paper-thin walls. Inside one of these insulae, you glimpse life as it truly is after sundown. You duck your head and step into a narrow doorway, uninvited, but invisible here, like a shadow. The air inside is thick with the smell of oil, smoke, and unwashed bodies. Your eyes adjust. There, on the packed earth floor, lies a small family. The father's tunic is rough wool, his hands cracked from work. The mother curls beside him, arm draped protectively over a little boy whose hair glints faintly in the lamplight. Their bed, nothing more than straw, flattened and darkened by years of use. You take a step closer and notice the details, the frayed edges of their blanket, barely covering their feet. They sleep close, breath mingling, body heat shared like currency. The boy stirs, muttering something dreamlike, and the mother hushes him without waking. You notice how still she becomes afterward, every muscle frozen, as though afraid to move and lose the tiny warmth she's gathered. A rat scurries across the wall beam, stopping to watch. It knows this place better than any human. It's patient, waiting for crumbs, maybe a dropped olive pit. The man coughs in his sleep, startling the rodent, and for a moment everything stills again. You realize this is how most of Rome slept. No feather beds, no velvet sheets, just straw, a blanket of woven wool, and the faint comfort of each other's presence. Scholars still argue whether Roman insulae were truly death traps or just an early version of apartment life. But one thing's certain: sleep was a fragile privilege here, earned after a day of backbreaking labor and constant noise. Outside, you hear the faint rumble of a passing cart, maybe someone hauling water barrels. The floor vibrates slightly. You imagine how many nights were lost to such sounds. Footsteps, wheels, voices, neighbors arguing, children crying. Sleep in ancient Rome wasn't silence. It was adaptation. You crouch lower to study the mat they're lying on. It's filled with straw and bits of grass, lumpy and uneven. You reach out, fingertips brushing the coarse texture. It's rough enough to scratch your skin, but at least it keeps them off the cold ground. Romans called this kind of bed a stramentum, literally something strewn. Practical, not poetic. When the straw got too filthy or infested, it was burned and replaced. Until then, people simply lived with the fleas. You suppress a shiver. Fleas were as Roman as togas. There's even an old graffiti found in Pompeii where someone complained that the pests of the night bit harder than love itself. You smile faintly at that. Leave it to Romans to romanticize everything, even itching. The father turns, and his hand lands on his wife's shoulder. She exhales softly, relaxing. You feel the faintest tug of empathy, the way their bodies seem to instinctively find each other, forming a small fortress against the cold. There's beauty in it, raw and unpolished, the kind of intimacy born not from luxury, but necessity. The oil lamp flickers lower, casting shadows that dance across the cracked wall. You notice scribbles, maybe a child's drawing, maybe tally marks from counting debts. Life here is etched onto surfaces that will never make it into marble history. You look closer and see something odd, a tiny charm nailed above the door, shaped like an eye. You remember reading that Romans hung these to ward off evil spirits, especially during sleep. They feared nightmares as signs of divine warnings, not random tricks of the mind. You back out quietly, letting the door creak closed behind you. The alley outside is narrower here, hemmed in by damp walls. The smell of urine, rotting straw, and cooking oil blends into something you wish you could forget. You hear another cough echo from the next room, then laughter, dry, brittle, the kind that ends too quickly. Life and fatigue mingled in one endless loop. You move deeper into the warren, brushing against hanging laundry that's long since stopped drying. Somewhere above, you hear footsteps, a neighbor pacing, perhaps sleepless. The ceiling groans under his weight, dust falling like ancient snow. It hits your hair, your eyelashes. You blink it away. You reach a small open courtyard where a few residents have set clay pots over low fires. The glow of embers casts orange halos on the walls. A woman sits beside one pot, stirring something thick. She looks up at you, or maybe through you, then back down at her work. Her husband snores beside her, slumped against the wall, a half-empty jug of wine at his feet. His head tilts dangerously close to the fire, but she doesn't move him. She just keeps stirring, the wooden spoon scraping the pot in steady rhythm. The odd detail hits you. Romans often used ashes mixed with oil to rub on their skin during winter nights. It trapped warmth, they believed. She does that now, dips her fingers into the mixture, smears a bit onto her arms, then yawns. For a moment she looks peaceful, her eyes closing briefly as if letting the fire hypnotize her. You feel that same lull tugging at you, the kind of drowsiness that doesn't come from comfort, but exhaustion, a surrender. You sink down on a stone bench nearby. The warmth from the fire brushes your face. A gust of wind moves through the courtyard, fluttering a corner of cloth hung above you. It's patched and faded, but in the glow it almost looks golden. You think of how these people survived night after night like this, not despite discomfort, but through it. Their resilience was their blanket. You tilt your head back, gazing at the thin sliver of sky visible between rooftops. Stars blink faintly, fighting through the city's smoke. Somewhere a baby starts crying again. Someone else curses softly. The fire crackles. It's chaos, yes, but it's also life. The raw, imperfect heartbeat of an empire. You close your eyes. The stone beneath you is cold. The air hums faintly with distant movement. You imagine drifting off here, shoulder to shoulder with strangers. The city's pulse cradling you. And as your thoughts fade, you realize maybe that's what sleep meant for ancient Romans. Not comfort, but coexistence. You leave the crowded insulae behind, stepping into a slightly wider street where the city feels marginally less suffocating. The faint aroma of baked bread lingers from an all-night baker's oven, mixing with the earthy smell of rain-soaked cobblestones. You pause, taking in the surreal contrast. The comforting scent of food, the rough chill of the night air, and the low murmur of distant voices. This is the Rome of the common folk, alive in ways that wealthier districts cannot capture. You wander past a patrician villa, peering through its high iron gate. Marble floors, ornate frescoes, and decorative fountains, a glimpse into a world insulated from the harshness of the streets. Here, sleep has the semblance of luxury. Thick mattresses stuffed with wool or feathers, soft pillows, and the faint scent of perfumed oils. Yet even the rich sometimes found it elusive. Scholars still argue whether lavish bedding truly improved rest, or if the wealthy were simply more distracted by status, duty, and philosophy than sleep itself. You imagine a Roman senator lying awake, staring at the ceiling fresco of Venus and Mars, worrying over taxes or alliances, while a servant adjusts the thick curtains to keep the cold out. You notice the odd details. A servant brushing away a fly from a sleeping infant, a cat stretched lazily across a silk pillow, a bowl of warm milk left beside the bedside. The subtle intimacy of these moments contrasts sharply with the raw survival in the streets you just left. Wealth changes the environment, yes, but it doesn't guarantee the comfort of genuine rest. Slipping further along the street, you approach a cluster of small gardens nestled between buildings. Here, a few Romans have tried to carve out spaces of peace. Potted plants, small fountains, and herbs that emit gentle scents meant to soothe. You pause, inhaling the faint perfume of lavender and rosemary, imagining the intention behind it, a natural lullaby in the absence of modern comforts. Some Romans believed certain aromas could chase away nightmares. a quaint superstition that seems almost wise in hindsight. You drift closer to the villa's perimeter, where the light from open windows spills onto the street. Inside, you can see scenes of domestic life unfolding quietly. A mother tucking her children in, a scholar hunched over scrolls, a man tracing the outline of his day in a diary. Life, though luxurious, still carries the subtle tension of expectation and vigilance. Even in their soft beds, the rich are tethered to the city's pulse, never fully detached. As you step into a quieter alley, you notice the night watchman making his rounds. His torch sputters, casting irregular shadows that seem to animate the walls themselves. You follow him at a respectful distance, observing his disciplined march. Guards in Rome didn't just patrol, they maintained the city's fragile sense of order. Sleeplessness was part of their duty. You reflect on this juxtaposition. Some suffer from discomfort, yet sleep. Others enjoy luxury, yet remain awake. Sleep, it seems, is not solely a function of comfort. The alley narrows again, leading you to a small courtyard where a group of women sit around a fire. Their hands are busy, weaving, mending, and preparing simple meals. One woman glances at you briefly before returning to her work. The firelight catches in her hair, casting warm tones on the worn faces around her. The odd detail of her surroundings strikes you. A stray chicken nestled against the edge of the fire, seeking warmth, just as humans do. The proximity of animals and humans in these shared spaces emphasizes the improvisation of warmth and comfort in Roman life. Above you, laundry flaps in the night breeze. The fabric seems almost spectral under the dim torchlight, dancing in time with the faint rustling of leaves. You pause to watch, imagining the effort it took to hang and dry these clothes without the conveniences of modern life. Even the simplest of tasks were rituals, intimately tied to survival and endurance. Your thoughts drift back to the alleys and insulae. There's a quiet poetry in the way humans adapt, bending around limitations, forming rituals, and creating spaces of rest wherever possible. The rich might have ornate chambers, but the ingenuity of the poor, straw mats, layered tunics, shared body heat, is no less remarkable. This thought lulls you, and the rhythm of your own breathing begins to synchronize with the ambient noises around you. Distant carts, a baby's whimper, the crackle of fire, the occasional bark of a dog. Somewhere nearby, a philosopher mutters to himself while pacing under a lamplight. Scholars still argue whether these solitary walks improved contemplation or merely reflected insomnia. You watch him, imagining the candlelight catching the lines of fatigue on his face. There's a strange connection across classes here. Sleep eludes both the rich and the learned. You continue onward, crossing another small bridge where the Tiber glimmers under the moon. The water murmurs faintly, reflecting silver threads across your path. The sound is soothing, hypnotic. You pause to listen, feeling the city breathe beneath you, alive even in its nocturnal slumber. You consider how many Romans, from every walk of life, have crossed this very bridge before. How many have wrestled with the same fragility of rest, the same pursuit of warmth and quiet in a restless city. Finally, you reach the steps of a small shrine tucked into the corner of the bridge. A single oil lamp flickers beside a statue of Fortuna, the goddess of fortune and luck. You kneel briefly, tracing the contours of the marble, feeling the coolness seep into your hands. Ancient Romans believed that Fortuna could guide dreams, protect sleepers, and influence the unseen flow of their nights. The thought lingers in your mind, soft and ethereal, as you lean back to rest against the cool stone. In this quiet interlude, the city feels suspended, a tapestry of lives intertwined by necessity, hope, and the simple human need to sleep. And as your eyes close, you realize that Rome, in all its grandeur and chaos, cradles its inhabitants, rich, poor, or wandering, in the same rhythm of the night. The air shifts as you leave the bridge behind, carrying a faint chill that creeps into your tunic. You follow a narrow lane lined with low buildings, their plaster cracked and peeling, the smell of damp stone rising from the walls. It's quiet now, the distant hum of the city dimmed, but the occasional shuffle of a rat or the soft groan of timber settling reminds you that Rome never fully sleeps. Here, you notice the subtle gestures that allow humans to carve out warmth and rest amidst imperfection. You stop before a small doorway, where a family has stacked thin wool blankets over a straw mat. The father, a baker, has just returned from his overnight shift, his face streaked with flour. He sits carefully, making sure not to disturb the mat, and leans against the wall to catch a few precious moments of rest. The mother smooths the blanket over her sleeping children, whispering a prayer to household gods that even she isn't certain will be heard. The odd detail catches your attention. She keeps a small pot of water near the door, not for washing, but to pour over the mat in case a rat or snake wanders in. Ancient ingenuity meets necessity. You pause to consider how blankets, or pallia as they were sometimes called, weren't the plush layers you're used to. They were thin wool, often coarse and lumpy, sometimes patched with extra fabric scavenged from worn garments. It's hard to imagine sleep under such layers, but it's what countless Romans did every night, clinging to warmth like a fragile shield against the cold and damp. Scholars still argue whether Romans ever prioritized comfort over practical survival, but the ingenuity required to keep warm is undeniable. A soft wind slips through the alley, carrying the faint scent of cooking fires. Someone's boiling lentils, another stirring a pot of barley, the steam curling into the night. You notice how people cluster near these tiny sources of heat, leaning close to conserve warmth. One man, probably a mason, has his head resting on a rolled tunic, hands tucked beneath his chin. His eyes are closed, but the tension in his shoulders betrays a half-sleep, alert even while resting. You realize that sleep here isn't absolute. It's a negotiation between comfort and danger. Above you, laundry flaps on a line, tattered and worn. It rustles softly in the night, almost like a lullaby. Some Romans believed the gentle motion of fabric in the wind could calm the mind, ward off nightmares, or even invite dreams blessed by the gods. You watch a sheet sway in the breeze, moonlight glinting off its faded patterns, and feel a strange sense of serenity in such small, overlooked details. You move along the alley, passing by an open window where a philosopher sits hunched over scrolls by candlelight. He's insomniac by choice or habit, scribbling notes for tomorrow's lecture or perhaps just for himself. Scholars still debate whether these nocturnal reflections enhanced Roman thought or were simply the results of relentless intellectual anxiety. You imagine him stretching, yawning, and finally laying his head on a thin pillow substitute, a folded toga maybe, trying to drift into a sleep that seems almost undeserved after hours of contemplation. A dog trots past your feet, sniffing curiously before disappearing into the darkness. The alley widens slightly, and you spot a small garden tucked between buildings. Herbs grow haphazardly in clay pots: rosemary, thyme, and a scattering of lavender. You notice how the scent subtly warms the air, a natural comfort for those who rely on such small luxuries. Someone has strung a thin blanket along a low branch, creating a rudimentary windbreak. It's not much, but it demonstrates the same human impulse you've noticed all night, the desire to carve out safety and warmth, however modest. You follow a faint path into the courtyard, where a tiny fire burns in a clay brazier. 3 women sit close together, hands busy with weaving and mending. One pauses, adjusting a thread in her work, while her companion hums softly. The firelight glows on their faces, creating shifting shadows that seem almost alive. It's here, in these shared spaces, that you see a rhythm of survival. They trade warmth, motion, and sound to lull themselves into the rare moments of rest that night allows. The odd detail catches your eye again. One of the women has a small charm hanging from her belt, a protective amulet against nightmares. Romans often feared nocturnal spirits, believing them to haunt those sleeping unguarded. You imagine a child clutching a similar charm, half asleep, trusting in both superstition and parental vigilance for safety. You continue past the courtyard and reach a small stone-floored room where a musician sleeps. His instrument, a lyre, leans against the wall. He curls into a ball on the floor, sheet rolled under his head, and a thin wool blanket drawn over his legs. His fingers twitch occasionally in dreams, perhaps replaying a melody he's composed, or perhaps rehearsing for an audience that exists only in memory. Sleep here is intimate, raw, and fragmentary, yet it is enough. The night presses on, dense and enveloping. Somewhere, a baby cries, a cart creaks across distant streets, and the river murmurs faintly. Each sound layers over the other, creating a lullaby that is far from quiet but strangely effective. You lean back against the wall, closing your eyes, and let the rhythm of the city seep into you. Ancient Rome is alive even in sleep, its people and animals coexisting in fragile harmony. You take a deep breath, imagining the cool marble beneath your back, the faint warmth of neighbors nearby, the gentle sway of laundry, and the soft glow of distant fires. Sleep, in this city of imperfection, is not comfort. It is an art of adaptation, a negotiation with reality, and a fleeting victory against exhaustion. You feel your eyelids grow heavier, your thoughts slower, and the gentle hum of life around you becomes a soothing rhythm. The world here, chaotic, rough, alive, seems to cradle you as it has cradled countless Romans before you. You rise again, stepping into a quieter lane where the night air carries the faint tang of the Tiber. The city feels more spacious here, the buildings lower, the sounds softer, though the distant clatter of carts reminds you that Rome never truly sleeps. You pass a small bakery, its oven still warm, and smell the faint hint of bread mingling with smoke. A lone baker sits cross-legged on a crate, resting his head on a rolled tunic, eyes half closed. He's not yet asleep, but he's close, that fragile space between consciousness and surrender. The street narrows as you move forward, guiding you toward the residential quarters. The insulae here are taller and tighter than before, stacked like layers of a carefully constructed puzzle. The alley is dimly lit by a single oil lamp, its light flickering against damp walls. You notice the subtle gestures of survival, a cloth thrown over a doorway to keep drafts out, a small clay pot with water beside a sleeping mat, a thin blanket carefully tucked around a child. Odd little solutions born out of necessity, yet intimate in their ingenuity. Through a partially open door, you glimpse a family attempting rest. The father lies on a straw mat, tunic rolled under his head, one arm tucked beneath him. The mother sits beside him, brushing a child's hair away from its face. Their faces are calm but tired, bodies close, conserving heat. Fleas and lice were a common nuisance, and their presence was accepted as part of nightly life, an odd discomfort you notice even from afar. Scholars still debate whether these pests affected sleep quality significantly, but somehow, humans adapted. You walk a few steps further and notice the faint glow of a small courtyard. A fire burns in a clay brazier, illuminating the faces of a few residents. Their hands are busy weaving, mending, and preparing simple meals. One woman hums softly, a lullaby perhaps, while another shifts a blanket over her sleeping child. The firelight casts shadows that dance across the walls, creating the impression of movement where there is none. You feel an odd comfort in observing these tiny rituals, realizing that sleep here is communal, warmth, light, and sound shared among neighbors. The air is cooler now, and you notice the subtle layering of clothing people rely on to stay warm. Tunics rolled under the head, cloaks wrapped tightly around shoulders, and even skirts doubled over as makeshift blankets. The ingenuity is quiet but pervasive, survival shaped by human need rather than desire. You spot a small cat curled near a fire, mirroring the people's behavior, seeking heat where it can. A distant sound catches your attention, the soft strum of a lyre. You follow it, stepping into a small, dimly lit room where a musician sleeps. His instrument leans against the wall, fingers twitching faintly in dreams. Perhaps he is replaying melodies in sleep, or rehearsing an audience that exists only in memory. Sleep here is not purely rest. It's intertwined with life's rhythm, with dreams overlapping with wakefulness, creating a fragile balance. Outside, a gust of wind sweeps down the alley, rustling laundry lines above. A sheet flutters gently, brushing against the stone walls like a whisper. You pause, watching its slow, hypnotic dance. Some Romans believed the gentle motion of fabric could ward off nightmares or even attract protective spirits. You imagine a child clutching a charm while listening to this subtle lullaby, trusting both superstition and family vigilance for comfort. The night continues its slow, deliberate march. Somewhere nearby, a baby cries, a dog growls softly, and a distant door creaks. The city hums quietly, alive in its imperfect, improvisational way. Sleep here is communal, adaptive, a negotiation with the environment. Each sound, each flicker of firelight, each shifting shadow contributes to a nocturnal symphony, chaotic, yet strangely soothing. You find a low stone bench beside the wall and settle against it. Your back presses against cold marble, your cloak wrapped tightly around your shoulders. You let your gaze drift upward, tracing the faint glimmer of stars above the rooftops. Somewhere in the distance, a watchman paces, torch sputtering, footsteps echoing. The rhythm lulls you, the city's breath syncing with your own. You close your eyes and allow the gentle chaos to envelop you. The cold, the light, the soft murmurs, the distant strum of a lyre, all of it merges into a lullaby centuries in the making. Sleep in this ancient city is not comfort alone, but resilience, adaptation, and coexistence. You feel the steady heartbeat of Rome under you, cradle and challenge intertwined. And as you finally allow yourself to sink into the moment, a quiet thought settles in. No matter the era, humans find a way to rest, to survive, and to dream, even under the roughest conditions. You step into a quieter corner of the city, where the narrow streets twist and fold like the veins of a living organism. The damp stone walls radiate the lingering chill of the night, and the faint smell of wet earth mixes with the distant aroma of bread and smoke. You notice the small details that make this nocturnal Rome tangible. A stray cat weaving between your feet, a child's toy forgotten on the steps, a stray tunic fluttering from a low balcony. It's in these tiny glimpses that you understand how life and sleep coexisted here. Precarious, inventive, and intimate. Ahead, a small courtyard opens up, lit by a clay brazier at its center. Around it, 3 women sit cross-legged, their hands busy with weaving, mending, or preparing food for the next day. The flickering flames cast long shadows across their faces, exaggerating lines of fatigue and concentration. You notice one woman brushing her hair with slow, deliberate motions, a soft hum escaping her lips. It's a lullaby, a rhythm meant as much for herself as for anyone sleeping nearby. The odd detail, a tiny charm dangling from her belt, reminds you of the Roman belief that protective talismans could ward off nightmares, a superstition as common as practical. You wander closer to observe without intruding. On the far side of the courtyard, a man sleeps atop a thin layer of straw, rolled tunic beneath his head, cloak draped over his shoulders. You notice how carefully he positions himself, curling into the smallest form possible to conserve warmth. Scholars still argue whether these thin mats and wool layers were sufficient to survive harsh winters or merely symbolic gestures of comfort. Yet in observing him, you realize that adaptation often outweighed luxury. Humans make do, and in doing so, invent their own methods of resilience. The soft gurgle of a nearby fountain accompanies the subtle creak of timber floors from above. You glance up to see the windows of the insula dimly illuminated, silhouettes of families engaged in quiet nocturnal activity. In one window, a mother tucks her children beneath a thin blanket, whispering a lullaby that has likely been repeated for generations. The faint flicker of candlelight dances across the walls, creating a gentle motion that soothes even the restless. Moving along, you pass a small doorway where a baker rests after his night's work. His body slumps against a wooden post, hands folded over his chest. He's partially asleep, yet every muscle remains alert to the city's rhythms. You pause, noticing the odd detail of his half-empty flour sack beside him, left open perhaps to dry overnight, or simply abandoned in exhaustion. Life in Rome, you realize, was an intricate balance between survival and routine, with sleep wedged somewhere in between. Above, laundry flutters in the breeze, casting ghostly shadows on the walls. You pause to watch a sheet sway gently, imagining the belief that such movement could ward off evil spirits or bring peaceful dreams. A child somewhere clutches a small charm while the fabric flutters, bridging superstition and instinct. Even in its simplest forms, sleep in ancient Rome was never isolated. It was shared, observed, and protected, often with a mix of practicality and ritual. The distant hum of carts and the occasional bray of a donkey punctuate the quiet, reminding you that the city never truly rests. Sleep here is adaptive, a negotiation between warmth, safety, and opportunity. You follow a faint path to a small alcove where a musician rests beside his lyre. Fingers twitch in sleep, replaying a melody only he can hear. The faint aroma of spilled wine and oil fills the space. Sleep in this context is layered, a combination of physical rest, environmental adaptation, and the mental processing of an entire day's trials. A cold gust sweeps through the alley, fluttering torn fabrics and stirring dust from cracks in the stone. You shiver slightly, but it is the human need to persist, to find warmth, to rest, and to dream that strikes you most. The families, the workers, the philosophers, and the musicians all carve out their space in this cityscape, often in overlapping layers of proximity, each finding a sliver of comfort wherever possible. Finally, you pause at the edge of the alley, leaning against a stone wall. The night is dense, punctuated by faint sounds of life, each contributing to a rhythm that is both chaotic and soothing. You close your eyes and breathe in the mixture of smoke, earth, and faint perfume from nearby herbs. Sleep, fragile yet persistent, moves over the city like a slow tide. You imagine yourself surrendering to it, carried by the same quiet determination that allowed countless Romans to rest through centuries of imperfection. The night air hums softly as your eyelids grow heavy. You feel the weight of history press gently around you, the cobblestones beneath your feet, the flickering lamps, the muted conversations of strangers. And in that moment, you understand, sleep is not merely a pause, but a testament to survival, adaptation, and shared humanity. You leave the courtyard behind, stepping into a slightly wider street where the chill of night bites gently at your face. The sounds of the city are faint here, filtered through narrow alleyways and the occasional clatter of distant carts. You notice the subtle rhythms of Roman nocturnal life, a dog padding softly across cobblestones, a child stirring in a neighbor's doorway, a lone woman carrying a small bucket of water from the fountain. Life persists even when sleep hovers like a fragile dream. Ahead, a small group of laborers huddle near a low fire, wrapped in worn cloaks and tunics. They whisper softly, sharing scraps of conversation that seem more about companionship than actual necessity. One man rests his head on a folded blanket, the other leans against the wall, arms crossed tightly to preserve warmth. Oddly, one of them balances a small wooden box atop his knees, perhaps containing a meal saved for later or a tiny keepsake. Scholars still argue whether these personal rituals, layering blankets, small tokens, murmured prayers, were more symbolic or purely practical, but observing them, you sense a harmony in these small gestures. You move closer to watch a woman tending to a child. The little one shivers slightly in the night air, and she adjusts the blanket with practiced care. Her hands are calloused from daily labor, yet gentle as they smooth the rough wool over her child's body. Fleas, lice, and the pervasive chill are tolerated as part of nightly life. Discomfort is accepted rather than fought. She whispers a lullaby, low and rhythmic, and you can almost feel its soft pull on the edges of consciousness. Beyond them, a narrow stairway leads up to the second story of the insulae. You ascend carefully, mindful of loose steps and uneven beams. Here, a scholar sits hunched over scrolls, quill scratching softly. His thin mattress is rolled tightly, more for elevation than comfort, and his cloak is tucked under his head as a pillow substitute. You notice the odd detail of a small clay figurine beside him, perhaps a deity to watch over his sleep, or simply a keepsake of the day. Sleep for him is interrupted, fragmented, a negotiation between fatigue and the insistence of intellect. Stepping back onto the rooftop, you see the expanse of the city under moonlight. Roof tiles stretch in jagged patterns, chimneys casting long, skeletal shadows. Somewhere, a cat leaps gracefully between them, the silent hunter of the night. You pause to watch, feeling the precarious balance of life above the streets. The rooftops serve as escape routes, sleeping spaces for those without shelter, and even vantage points for quiet contemplation. The odd and intimate details keep revealing themselves. In one corner, a small fire glows beneath a clay pot, creating a faint halo of light and warmth. A man crouches beside it, stirring a thin gruel. Perhaps he is preparing a meal for the children asleep nearby, or simply preserving warmth for himself. Smoke curls gently upward, blending with the cool night air. It's practical, yes, but there's something soothing in the ritual, a human touch in the chaos of survival. As you descend back to the street, you notice faint graffiti on the plaster walls, a crude sketch of a chariot, tally marks for debts or days, the scrawl of names. Life is recorded quietly in hidden corners, in acts both intentional and inadvertent. Sleep here is intertwined with memory, with presence, with subtle connections between people who share these alleys and courtyards. You continue past a small shrine lit by a flickering oil lamp. The figure of Fortuna stares silently, a guardian of chance and dreams. Romans believed that these quiet rituals, the charms and small prayers, could shape the course of rest and ward off bad fortune. You imagine a child pressing a tiny hand against the marble base, trusting instinct and superstition alike to safeguard the night. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of nearby bakeries, the tang of river water, and the earthy aroma of wet stone. You inhale slowly, letting the mixture ground you in this ancient moment. Sleep is not a singular experience here. It is a shared, layered phenomenon, influenced by environment, ritual, and human ingenuity. Finally, you find a narrow ledge beside a building and sit, letting the city's rhythm wash over you. Fires glow, shadows flicker, soft murmurs drift from open windows, and somewhere above, a musician hums a tune. You close your eyes briefly, letting your own breathing synchronize with the heartbeat of Rome, understanding that in this imperfect, improvised, and chaotic city, sleep is both fragile and resilient. A small victory every night for those who claim it. You wander deeper into the labyrinthine streets of Rome, where the faint glow of oil lamps highlights uneven cobblestones slick with the night's condensation. The chill creeps under your tunic, but the air carries a strange comfort, the smell of bread, smoke, and damp stone intermingling into the nocturnal perfume of the city. You notice how the alleys wind unpredictably, sometimes opening into small courtyards, sometimes narrowing until walls nearly touch. Life and sleep weave together here, each shaping the other in subtle, overlooked ways. A faint murmur draws you toward a small gathering of laborers resting near a brazier. They are wrapped tightly in coarse wool cloaks, heads bowed, eyes flickering between wakefulness and exhaustion. One man adjusts a straw mat beneath him, ensuring the smallest points of contact with cold stone are covered. Oddly, a tiny bird has found its way into the warmth of the firelight, hopping nervously from edge to edge, as if seeking the same refuge humans do. Scholars still debate whether these nocturnal rituals, huddling together, layering clothing, murmuring soft words, were conscious survival strategies or instinctive adaptations, yet their effectiveness is clear in the quiet endurance of these nights. You move a few steps farther and see a family tucked into a narrow room, sleeping shoulder to shoulder on flattened straw mats. The father's tunic is rough against his skin, yet he clings to the warmth shared with his family. The mother wraps an arm around a child, murmuring a low lullaby that seems to float beyond the room, seeping into the street like a fragile mist. Even in the absence of blankets or pillows, you sense the comfort of proximity, a form of protection that transcends material need. A dog pads silently past your feet, its paws barely audible against the cobblestones. You follow the sound to a small courtyard where someone has placed a brazier in the center, the faint glow illuminating a set of makeshift sleeping spaces. One man rests with his head on a rolled tunic, Another uses a folded cloak as a pillow. Fleas and lice are ignored, tolerated as an inseparable part of nightly life. You watch them shift occasionally, subtly adjusting positions to share warmth and avoid discomfort. A dog pads silently past your feet, its paws barely audible against the cobblestones. You follow the sound to a small courtyard where someone has placed a brazier in the center, the faint glow illuminating a set of makeshift sleeping spaces. One man rests with his head on a rolled tunic, another uses a folded cloak as a pillow. Fleas and lice are ignored, tolerated as an inseparable part of nightly life. You watch them shift occasionally, subtly adjusting positions to share warmth and avoid discomfort. Above, laundry flaps gently in the night breeze, shadows dancing across walls and floors. Some Romans believed the movement of fabric could guide dreams or ward off spirits. You notice a small charm hanging from a windowsill, shaped like an eye, worn smooth from years of use. Perhaps it is superstition, perhaps ritual. Either way, it forms a quiet barrier between sleep and the imagined dangers of the night. A faint melody drifts from a rooftop above, a musician practicing softly in half-sleep. Fingers twitch against the strings of a lyre, producing a sound that merges with the hum of the city. Distant carts, dogs barking, children whispering. You pause, letting the mixture of music and ambient life lull your mind into a reflective quiet. Sleep in this context is not just rest. It is participation in the nocturnal symphony of Rome, an interwoven dance of human and animal presence. You step toward a small shrine tucked into a corner, lit by a flickering lamp beside the figure of Fortuna. Romans left offerings of coins, breadcrumbs, and small charms, trusting the goddess to safeguard their slumber. A child presses a tiny hand against the marble base, eyes heavy but hopeful. The charm around their neck glints faintly in the lamp's glow, a tangible link between superstition, ritual, and the fragile human need to rest. The wind brushes against your face, carrying the subtle warmth of nearby fires and the faint chill of the river. You inhale deeply, letting the mixed scents and soft sounds embed themselves in memory. Sleep is not a solitary act in this city. It is shared, adaptive, and alive. Every flicker of firelight, every hum of conversation, every careful layering of clothing contributes to the fragile architecture of nightly rest. Finally, you settle against the edge of a low stone wall, letting your body absorb the cool solidity beneath you. The night hums with life. Shadows shift, fires flicker, whispers drift from windows, and the occasional strum of a lyre punctuates the quiet. Closing your eyes, you allow yourself to feel the rhythm of the city. Sleep, fragile and transient, finds you here, cradled by the ingenuity, rituals, and resilience of countless Romans who have navigated nights much like this one. You wander onward, leaving the familiar hum of the courtyard behind, stepping into a narrower alley where shadows cling to the walls like lingering spirits. The cobblestones are slick from an earlier drizzle, reflecting faint starlight and the occasional flicker from a distant oil lamp. Each step echoes softly, merging with the subtle chorus of Rome at night, a dog padding across rooftops, the creak of a shutter, the low murmur of a family speaking in whispers. You realize sleep here isn't isolated. It's a thread woven through the city's nocturnal tapestry. Ahead, a group of laborers rests against the side of a building, their bodies curled into tight huddles. Coarse woolen cloaks cover their shoulders, straw mats beneath them serving as crude insulation. You notice the odd detail of a small clay cup placed beside a man's head, half filled with water, perhaps for cooling, perhaps for ceremonial reasons. Scholars still argue whether these small nightly rituals were born of superstition or practical survival instincts, but their persistence speaks to their significance. The low warmth of shared bodies and proximity to fire offers a fragile shield against the night's chill. You pass a tiny doorway, peeking in to see a family arranged on flattened straw mats. The mother gently rocks a child back and forth, her hand smoothing the child's hair. The father leans beside them, cloak folded under his head, eyes flicking occasionally to the doorway. Fleas, lice, and discomfort are omnipresent, tolerated as part of life. Oddly, a small coin lies beneath the child's mat. A makeshift charm, perhaps, to protect dreams or ward off spirits. You think about how objects, rituals, and proximity blend into nightly survival, creating a fragile architecture of rest. From above, the faint rustle of laundry flaps through the wind, casting eerie, dancing shadows on walls. Some Romans believed these movements could influence dreams, guiding them toward restful sleep or protecting from nightmares. You notice a tiny figurine perched on the windowsill, perhaps a god of sleep or a household deity. Its presence feels both whimsical and protective, an odd but comforting detail in the nocturnal landscape. You step into a quiet courtyard where a small fire glows in a clay brazier. 3 women sit nearby, weaving, mending, and preparing simple meals. One hums softly, her voice weaving into the rhythm of crackling firewood. You notice a child nestled close to her legs, slowly breathing, eyes closing as warmth and sound lull it toward slumber. The odd intimacy of shared space, heat, and sound illustrates how sleep in Rome was not just a biological necessity, but a social, communal act, a mixture of care, ritual, and environmental adaptation. A faint melody drifts from a rooftop above. A musician, perhaps a student of some distant master, experiments softly on a lyre. His fingers twitch unconsciously, producing notes that merge with the soft hum of the night, distant carts, murmuring voices, and the occasional rustle of animals. Scholars still debate whether nocturnal music was merely background ambiance or a deliberate method to ease rest, but its effect is undeniable. The melody blends seamlessly with the ambient noises, creating a delicate lullaby for those awake and asleep alike. You approach a small shrine tucked into a corner of the courtyard, lit by a single flickering lamp beside the figure of Fortuna. Coins and small offerings rest at her base, remnants of prayers whispered into the night. You notice a child pressing a tiny hand against the marble, eyes half closed, the charm around its neck glinting faintly in lamplight. Sleep here is intertwined with superstition and ritual, a delicate dance between human need and belief. The wind stirs gently, carrying the faint sense of nearby kitchens, fire smoke, and the river's cool breath. You inhale, letting the mixture ground you in this timeless scene. Sleep in ancient Rome is communal, layered, adaptive. A fragile victory claimed nightly by countless individuals, each employing ingenuity, ritual, and instinct to survive and rest. Finally, you lean against the low stone wall at the alley's edge, feeling the cold marble beneath you. Fires flicker in the distance, shadows shift and dance, murmurs drift from open windows, and the faint strum of a lyre punctuates the quiet. You close your eyes, letting the city's rhythm carry you into the fragile embrace of sleep. Amidst imperfection, discomfort, and improvisation, you realize rest is as much a human art as it is a biological need. You drift further into the heart of the city, where the streets twist and fold unpredictably, and the faint glow of oil lamps barely illuminates worn cobblestones. The air carries the faint aroma of bread cooling from nearby ovens, mingling with the damp earth and the subtle scent of herbs hung from windows to protect against sickness or bad luck. You notice how every alley seems alive with movement, a dog padding silently across the stones, a cat weaving through shadows, a child's soft whimper from behind a shuttered door. In these moments, sleep feels less like a solitary act and more like a communal ritual, stitched into the very fabric of nocturnal life. Ahead, a group of laborers huddles near a low brazier, their coarse cloaks wrapped tightly around their shoulders. They adjust straw mats beneath them, curling into compact forms to conserve heat. One man holds a small, worn wooden box on his lap, perhaps containing food, tools, or a tiny personal treasure. Oddly, the box rests against his chest as he dozes, a strange talisman of comfort. Scholars still debate whether such nightly routines were practical necessities or instinctive rituals, yet they offer a clear testament to human ingenuity in adapting to the night. A few steps forward, you peek through a doorway into a cramped room. A family sleeps shoulder to shoulder on flattened straw mats. The mother hums softly, rocking a child into a slumber that arrives slowly and unevenly. The father adjusts his tunic under his head, eyes flickering as he listens to the faint noises of the street. Fleas and lice are present but largely ignored, accepted as a part of nightly life. You notice a small coin tucked beneath the child's mat, perhaps a charm, a superstition intended to ward off bad dreams. Even in the simplest spaces, humans create patterns of protection and comfort that are invisible yet vital. Above you, laundry flutters gently in the breeze, casting moving shadows across cracked plaster walls. Some Romans believed that the subtle motion could influence dreams or drive away spirits, while others simply enjoyed the gentle sway as a visual rhythm that calmed the mind. A tiny figurine rests on a nearby windowsill, perhaps a protective deity or a household god. Its presence is odd but comforting, merging belief with practical survival in a small, intimate ritual. You step into a quiet courtyard illuminated by a small fire and a clay brazier. 3 women sit close together, weaving, mending, and preparing simple meals for the next day. One hums softly, her lullaby merging with the gentle crackle of flames and the distant hum of the city. A child nestled at her legs drifts slowly towards sleep, the warmth of the fire and the rhythm of human motion providing subtle comfort. The communal nature of this space, combined with fire and ritual, demonstrates that sleep in ancient Rome was not simply rest. It was a carefully managed intersection of warmth, sound, and human presence. A faint melody drifts from a rooftop above, where a musician experiments softly on a lyre. His fingers twitch subconsciously, producing notes that blend with the low murmur of distant conversations, the occasional clatter of carts, and the rustle of nocturnal animals. Scholars still debate whether music was intentionally used to ease sleep or merely a byproduct of restless minds, but its effect is undeniably soothing, adding texture to the nocturnal landscape. Nearby, a small shrine glows in the dim light, a flickering lamp illuminating the figure of Fortuna. Coins and tiny offerings lie at her feet, evidence of whispered prayers and nightly hopes. A child presses a hand to the marble base, charm dangling from their neck, eyes half closed. Sleep here intertwines superstition, ritual, and human necessity, forming a delicate tapestry of rest woven from countless individual practices. The wind carries faint hints of smoke, bread, and the river's cool breath. Each inhale draws you further into the nocturnal rhythm, syncing your body and mind with the city's pulse. Sleep is never solitary here. It's communal, layered, adaptive, and resilient. Every flicker of fire, rustle of cloth, and shared gesture contributes to the delicate architecture of nightly rest. You finally settle against a low stone wall, pressing your back to the cool surface. Fires flicker in the distance, shadows shift, whispers drift from open windows, and the soft strum of a lyre punctuates the night. You close your eyes, feeling the city cradle you as it has cradled countless Romans before. In imperfection, adaptation, and shared presence, sleep becomes both art and necessity. Fragile, persistent, and undeniably human. You move onward, leaving behind the familiar rhythms of the courtyard, stepping into a quieter, narrower lane. The night air carries a subtle dampness, and the faint smell of wood smoke and baking bread lingers, mixing with the earthy scent of the stone streets. The city seems almost alive in its quiet moments. The soft pad of a dog's paws, a distant child's restless murmur, the occasional shuffle of a rat in the shadows. Sleep here is not an isolated act, but a shared communal experience embedded in the city's pulse. You spot a group of laborers gathered around a small brazier, each wrapped in worn tunics and coarse wool cloaks. They curl into tight shapes on straw mats, conserving warmth in a night that offers little luxury. One man rests his head on a folded cloak while holding a small wooden box on his lap, perhaps containing food, a keepsake, or simply the habit of holding something familiar as he drifts into slumber. Oddly, the box seems almost like a talisman, a small anchor in the uncertainty of the night. Scholars still debate whether these nightly rituals were instinctive, practical, or both. Yet their persistence suggests a blend of necessity and human creativity. A few steps further, you peek through a low doorway into a cramped room. A family sleeps shoulder to shoulder on flattened straw mats. The mother hums softly, rocking a child towards sleep, while the father adjusts a tunic beneath his head, eyes scanning faintly for disturbances. Fleas and lice, while common, are accepted as a quiet nuisance, part of the texture of life. A tiny coin tucked beneath the child's mat seems almost whimsical, a charm to protect from nightmares, an intimate expression of hope and care. You realize that even the simplest spaces are filled with layers of attention and protective ritual. Above you, laundry flutters in the night breeze, casting shifting shadows on cracked plaster walls. Some Romans believed the movement could influence dreams or ward off spirits. Others may have found comfort in the gentle, hypnotic motion. Nearby, a small figurine rests on a windowsill, a household deity, a guardian of sleep, or simply a talisman. Its presence blends superstition with practicality, offering psychological reassurance in the fragile pursuit of rest. You continue into a small courtyard lit by a fire in a clay brazier. 3 women sit close together, weaving and mending, murmuring softly in rhythm with the flickering flames. A child nestled at one of their legs drifts slowly into slumber, soothed by warmth and human presence. Here, sleep is not just a personal act. It is a carefully orchestrated blend of proximity, fire, ritual, and shared vigilance. The collective attention to warmth, light, and noise ensures that the night is survivable, even in modest dwellings. Whispering almost to yourself, you allow the night to wrap around you, soft and protective, like the faint embrace of history itself. In this space, in this moment, the world is calm, and you are safe. Sleep comes slowly, persistently, and surely.